You can learn almost anything on the internet today, from quantum physics to engine repair. Pick a subject and someone has already posted a tutorial for it. But between the 1940s and the early 1990s, DIY radio kits from Heathkit and Heathkit shipped to kitchen tables across America and taught their builders 5 lessons that would shape Silicon Valley, send amateur operators into orbit, and never once make it onto a screen. Number 1. How things actually work. When Heathkit shipped one of its over 300 kit models to your doorstep during the 1960s, the instruction manual didn't begin with theory. It began with a soldering lesson. Before you understood what a capacitor did, you knew how to heat a joint, flow solder, and inspect the connection. The manuals used fold-out, exploded diagrams drawn from the builder's viewpoint with a checkbox for every single step, because Heathkit understood that the body had to learn before the mind could follow. From there, builders learned resistor color codes by reading them off tiny, striped cylinders with their own eyes. They wound 56 turns of magnet wire around a ferrite core to build an inductor by hand. They identified vacuum tube pins by rotating hot glass tubes in their fingers. And before applying power for the first time, the manual instructed you to measure circuit resistances with a multimeter, a precaution designed to prevent what builders called a catastrophic smoke blowout. The sensory dimension went even further. Experienced technicians described diagnosing circuit faults by smell, recognizing the acrid scent of a burnt resistor before they even locate it visually. They scanned for scorch marks, discolored insulation, and components hot enough to burn fingertips. Cognitive science research on embodied learning confirms what those kit builders discovered on their own. People understand abstract concepts more deeply when they physically manipulate objects rather than study symbols on a screen. The hands teach what the eyes alone cannot. But the skill that actually built careers was not assembly. It was something that happened the moment a finished kit refused to work. Number 2, the debugging mindset. Every kit builder eventually faced the same terrifying moment. You finished the last solder joint, flipped the power switch, and nothing happened. Or worse, something smelled like it was burning. What came next was the real education. Repair technicians describe a diagnostic sequence that maps directly onto modern software debugging. You start with a close visual inspection, looking for cold joints, bridged connections, or reversed components. If nothing obvious appears, you open the schematic and follow the roadmap of the circuit, tracing where current is supposed to flow and identifying where it deviates. Then you test each suspect component individually with a multimeter, checking for a shorted capacitor, a failed diode, or a dead transistor. One technician described the principle using a dam analogy. A resistor acts as a controlled valve managing current flow through the circuit. When a component fails upstream, it punches a hole in that dam, and everything downstream gets washed away. The burnt resistor you found was a symptom, not the root cause. Replace the symptom without tracing the upstream failure, and the same problem destroys the replacement within hours. That discipline of separating symptoms from root cause and working backward through a logical system became the foundation of engineering troubleshooting. And radio kits were teaching it to teenagers in basements decades before anyone formalized it in a textbook. What comes next is the part that still surprises people who grew up after the kit era ended. Number 3, the confidence to build. A Heathkit radio was not a toy. The HW101 transceiver took days to complete. The lunchbox-size portable transceivers took 6 to 8 hours of careful soldering and winding. But when you finished, turned the dial, and heard a voice crackling through the speaker from hundreds or thousands of miles away, something changed in how you saw the world. You had built a working piece of communications technology with your own hands, and the machines around you stopped looking like sealed mysteries. Steve Jobs understood this at a young age. His neighbor, a Hewlett-Packard engineer named Larry Lang, introduced him to Heathkit as a boy. Jobs later said those kits gave him an understanding of what was inside a finished product and how it worked. But the bigger lesson, he said, was that it gave him the confidence that through exploration and learning, he could understand seemingly very complex things in his environment. Steve Wozniak followed the same trajectory. His father, a Lockheed engineer, gave him a crystal radio kit at age 7 and an electronics kit a year later. It seemed like a small gift at the time, but the trajectory it set in motion would reshape the personal computer industry. By 6th grade, Wozniak had designed a computer that could play tic-tac-toe. The pipeline from Radio Kit to Silicon Valley was not metaphorical. It was literal, and it extended beyond personal computers entirely. Owen Garriott, an amateur radio operator with the call sign W5LFL, became the first ham to transmit from space aboard the shuttle Columbia in 1983, making hundreds of contacts from orbit and convincing NASA that amateur radio could connect students directly to space exploration. But there was one more thing those kits demanded from their builders, and it is the quality the internet has done the most to erode. Number 4, patience and the payoff. A Heathkit build was not a one-evening project. You opened the shipping box, spread hundreds of components across the kitchen table, and started at step 1 of a manual that sometimes ran past 100 pages. You soldered one joint, checked the box, moved to the next. Night after night, you returned to the same half-finished circuit board, picking up exactly where you left off. There was no skip button, no fast forward, and no preview of the finished result to keep you motivated. The only feedback was the slow, visible progress of watching a bare metal chassis gradually fill with components that you had placed and connected yourself. And the emotional payoff, when it finally arrived, was unlike anything a screen delivers. Parents and builders describe being amazed that a radio assembled on a kitchen table could pull in the BBC Radio Netherlands and shortwave stations broadcasting from the other side of the planet. That experience, spending days or weeks constructing a device and then hearing a human voice carried across an ocean by the machine in your hands, created a relationship with technology that downloading an app never will. Research on physical versus virtual labs confirms that hands-on work provides haptic sensory feedback no simulation can substitute. The kit taught you what it felt like to earn a result through sustained effort, and that feeling stayed with people for the rest of their lives. But the kit building experience had one ingredient that could never be boxed, shipped, or sold at any price. Number 5, community you couldn't download. When a kit builder finished assembling a shortwave receiver but couldn't get it working, the solution was not a search engine. It was a visit from a local ham radio operator who showed up at your kitchen table with test equipment and aligned the receiver for free. Builders from the Heathkit era describe a culture of informal mentorship in amateur radio clubs, where experienced operators helped beginners not because they were paid, but because someone had once done the same for them. That community built a pipeline stretching far beyond hobby electronics. The ARIS program on the International Space Station, successor to those shuttle-era experiments, has connected over 100 crew members with more than 1 million students from 49 U.S. states and 63 countries. Nobel laureate astrophysicist Joe Taylor, call sign K1JT, remains an active amateur operator who developed the weak signal software suite still used by hams worldwide. But this community is shrinking. Roughly 745,000 amateur radio licenses were active in the United States at the end of 2024, down from a peak above 770,000 just a few years earlier. An estimated 60 to 70% of current operators are over the age of 55. The decline tracks with the disappearance of kit-building culture and the erosion of school shop classes that once fed young operators into the hobby. The story of radio kits is not really a story about radios. It is a story about what happens when an entire society shifts from building things to merely consuming them, from understanding the machines around us to simply tapping their screens. In Seattle, only 4 of the 17 shop classes that once operated in city schools still exist. Federal vocational funding has dropped substantially since the mid-1980s. The modern equivalents are out there. Arduino has sold over 10 million boards. Raspberry Pi has shipped roughly 68 million units. The right to repair movement has pushed legislation through California, Colorado, Minnesota, New York, and Oregon. And Steve Wozniak himself has publicly endorsed the cause. The instinct to understand and fix the machines around us has not disappeared. But the infrastructure that once nurtured it, the kits on the kitchen table, the clubs in the basement, and the mentors who showed up with a multimeter and a free afternoon, left a gap that the internet, for all its reach, has never quite managed to fill.